Okay, so we're getting ready to start using these trigonometric identities to simplify, to verify, to match up, to find values. And so there are a lot of identities. These first 23 are the ones we're going to focus on, and you should have these written on your sheet. None of these are on the challenge exam reference sheet, which means all 23 of these you guys need to have memorized. And so the first 6, I feel like you know already, like you know cosecant's the reciprocal of the sine, you know cotangent's reciprocal of the tangent. These 2 right here, I feel like will be the first, well, these 2 and this one will be the first ones that you actually will get memorized, like brand new in your brain. And then there's just ways, like as you go through, that you can remember these without like spending a ton of time studying, but you do need to learn them. On 10 and 11, they're basically the same thing, except like this is 1 plus tangent squared. This one is 1 plus cotangent squared. And then this one equals secant squared. This one equals cosecant squared. So they're the same. They're the same identity, just one doesn't have the co and the other does. So tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant. The co-functions are kind of easy to remember because a co-function, either like sine's co-function is cosine, cosine's co-function is sine, tangent's co-function is cotangent. So you just take the word and you add a co, or you take off a co, and that gives its co-function. So that's not too terrible to remember. And then for even and odd, there are only 2 even functions. So the 2 even functions are cosine and secant. So when you do the cosine of negative u, it's the same as just cosine of u. And then the same thing with secant. And then the other 4 are odd. So the sine of negative u is negative sine of u. So anyway, work on memorizing those. We will have a memorization quiz on them. Okay, so you need some paper, and we are going to do lesson 5.1a today. We're going to spend several days on 5.1. We'll just call this Trigonometric Identities. So this is kind of an introductory lesson, and we'll come back and just focus on parts later. All right, so for example 1, we're going to use the given values to find the values of all 6 trig functions. Now we've done this before with triangles, but we're going to do it today with identities because I really want to start practicing these identities. All right, so what we're going to be given, what we're going to be given is that secant of x is 4 and that sine of x is less than 0. So all of that was what you're given. So now we're going to start finding things. All right, so if I know what the secant is, I already know what the cosine is because the cosine of x is the reciprocal of the secant. So 1/4. Okay. And then once I know the cosine, I can use this identity number 9 to find the sine. Okay. So what I know is that sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x is equal to 1. So what I'll do is I'll take what cosine of x is and put it in the place of that. So sine squared of x plus 1/4 squared is equal to 1. All right, so when I square 1/4, I'm going to get 1/16. Okay, and then I'm solving this for sine. So I'm going to subtract 1/16 from 1, and that's going to be 15/16. And then I'm going to find the square root. Now, normally when we solve an equation by taking the square root, we do the positive and the negative square root, but sine is only going to be one or the other. And what we'll do is look up here that it tells you that sine is negative. So it's going to be negative. All right. And then we take the square root of the numerator and we take the square root of the denominator. And that is what sine of x is. All right. As soon as we know what sine of x is, we automatically know what cosecant of x is. It is the reciprocal. All right. And then we wouldn't leave it in that form. We would simplify the radical. All right, now I'm going to go back and write which identities I used. So to get cosine, I used number 2. All right, and then this was the Pythagorean identity number 9. And then this was reciprocal identity number 1. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going. Once you have sine and cosine, you can figure out tangent by using number 7. So tangent of x is equal to sine of x divided by cosine of x. So tangent of x is equal to, our sine of x that we found was negative square root of 15/4, and my cosine was 1/4. All right, and then we know to divide by 1/4 is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, or multiplying by 4. So that means that tangent of x is going to be equal to negative square root of 15. So I think I've almost found all of them. Oh, let me label that one. That one was number 7. All right, so I found a new one and I've found 4. There's one more to find, and it's cotangent. It's going to be the reciprocal of the tangent, and that's according to number 6. So that would mean cotangent of x is negative square root of 15/15. Okay, so that's one thing we'll do with the identities is just find missing trig values. The other thing we're going to do is simplify down. So use them to simplify. That's like the main thing we're going to do actually. So for example 2, we're going to match the trigonometric expression with one of the following. All right, so our answer choices are going to be A is 1, B is sine squared of x minus cosine squared of x, C is cotangent of x, and D is cosecant squared of x. So when we simplify down, we're going to end up with one of those 4 things. All right. And our first problem we're going to do, call it I, is going to be sine of pi over 2 minus x over sine of x. Okay, so as soon as you see a pi minus 2 or pi over 2 minus x or something like that, you need to look at the co-function identities. And according to number 12, if you have the sine of pi over 2 minus a variable, it's equal to the cosine of that variable. So that numerator is going to be cosine of x, and the denominator is going to stay what it was. All right, and just to write yourself a note, we use number 12 to do that. Okay, then you start looking, keep looking at the identities. And right now we have cosine over sine. So you'll look to see if there's a way I can rewrite cosine over sine, and there is, using number 8. Cosine of x over sine of x is cotangent of x. Right, then we're going to check to make sure that's a choice, and it is. It's choice C. Okay, so we did our first simplifying problem. Okay, let's look at another one. For 2, or II, we have tangent of x times cotangent of x. All right. Now, what people do that kind of messes them up is that they try to do too much too fast. So they'll just keep on like reducing or simplifying when you don't. If you just do too much too fast, it kind of messes you up. So what I would do is just pick one of these, either tangent or cotangent, and just rewrite it. So I'm going to pick cotangent. So I'm going to leave tangent like it is, and I'm going to take cotangent and use this identity to rewrite it. So number 6. Rewrite it as 1 over tangent. All right, then when I multiply those together, I get tangent over tangent, or just 1. And that is an answer choice. That is choice A. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's look at 3, or I. Right, we have sine to the 4th minus cosine to the 4th of x. Oh, sorry, it's sine of, let me try that again. Sine to the 4th of x minus cosine to the 4th of x. All right. So right now, we can't really do too much, but what we want to do, and we'll focus like a whole day on this later, is we're going to factor this, right? So this is the difference of squares. So I'm going to do 2 parentheses, right? So what I'm going to put here and here needs to be the square root of sine to the 4th, which is going to be sine squared of x. When I do difference of squares, I have 1 plus and 1 minus. And then what I put here and here needs to be the square root of cosine to the 4th, which is cosine squared of x. Okay, then we're going to look at our identities. You guys see anything I can do? Yeah. Sine squared plus cosine squared is going to be 1. And then that we're going to multiply that by sine squared of x minus cosine squared of x. And then when you multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. And if I look back up here at my what I'm supposed to match with, that is one of my choices. And so that's going to be B. All right, so at this point right here, we use number 9. It's a very popular identity. You'll use it a lot. Okay, and then we're going to do one more. We'll call this IV, or 4 is what it stands for. So it is cosecant squared of x minus 1 over cosine squared of x. Now, one thing that you may not realize is these Pythagorean identities can be manipulated, right? So I don't have a Pythagorean identity that's cosecant squared minus 1. But if I took number 11 and I subtracted 1, I would end up with cosecant squared minus 1, and that is going to be equal to cotangent squared. All right, so we would replace that with cotangent squared of x. All right, so we used number 11 to do that. Okay. Then another thing you may not realize is the reciprocal and the quotient identities they work for different powers. So if I had cotangent to the 5th of u, I could rewrite that as cosine to the 5th sine to the 5th. If I had tangent squared, I could write that as sine squared over cosine squared. All right, so they work for powers. So that's what I'm going to do for this cotangent squared. I'm going to use number 8. And I'm going to rewrite cotangent squared as cosine squared of x over sine squared of x. Okay. Then I know I am going to divide by cosine squared. So when you're dividing with fractions, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal of that, cosine squared. And what happens is the cosine squared cancels out, and we're left with 1 over sine squared of x. All right, and then like the quotient identities, the reciprocal identities also work for powers. So if I have 1 over sine squared of u, that's the same as cosecant squared of u. So what I have here is 1 over sine squared of x. So that's the same as cosecant squared of x. Now let's check what we were supposed to match with, and that's my last choice, the one I haven't used yet, D. All right, now this stuff is going to challenge you, so the best thing that you can do is just work really hard and don't give up when it gets difficult for you. It's going to, trust me, but you can do it. All right, so there's some vocabulary. I want you to write it out because you are going to have these memorized. So 1 through 6, write it out, and then you have some others to do.